Can you tell me a little bit about the inception of the idea? You guys wrote it together, but did one or the other get that kind of spark of inspiration?
Antonio came to me with the idea. I mean, Antonio came to me and he said he cited a few influences, an author named George Simenon, some true crime stories, etc. And he said, I'm interested in doing this character study about a young man's unraveling in France after he meets a hostess in a hostess bar. And then we just started sharing our own personal experiences that we both had living in France. We both lived in France before. We'd both been heartbroken there before. And talked about ways of making the character initially relatable, and then how to gradually track his descent into what it is that he ultimately becomes.
And what is your joint writing process like when you actually sit there and putting words to paper?
It was very casual. It was much more casual and loose than this. It was a discussion. And Antonio, whatever revelations we would have in the process of talking about how the narrative could or should develop, then Antonio would then put pen to paper and hashed out an outline based on that. But the whole process, every scene was different. Like some scenes, we would get there on the day and kind of figure out what the words were going to be that day. But we would still kind of figure out, okay, you're going to say this, and then I'm going to say this, and you're going to say this. So it wasn't exactly improv, where you're coming up with new stuff like in the middle of the shot. Sometimes Antonio would come out with lengthy scenes written for us, and sometimes it would be from a series of improvised rehearsals. He would then transcribe what was working best from those rehearsals, and those would be the next day's scenes. So it was a very collaborative process with all of the actors, but particularly with Matty Diop, who also has a story credit on the film, who was invaluable as a creative partner and obviously as an actress.
Can you tell me about coming from this from a director perspective, but also a director who, like, with your arrangement here, with your rotation process, I imagine that you kind of can't turn your producing brain off, even if you're not taking a producing credit. So does that affect your writing, your shot selection, and all that?
No, I was just thinking, I think you do. I think you turn off your producing brain when you're, for the most part.
I do. No, I think that I'm aware of it. Like I'm aware of the reality of things. Like I'm aware of
right.
There's a pragmatic side to what
I don't produce, but I feel like I'm aware of the reality.
Yeah, but you as an actor, like you've spent so much time on set as an actor. And actors, I think, are so much more aware than people give them credit for. Like actors that have been on set for so much time, been like on professional sets. You know how it's supposed to go. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
You have such a sense of like schedule and like, you know how things move on a set more than probably a lot of directors who haven't been on set as much as.
Right. No, that's true.
You know, that's why when an actor comes onto a set to work with a younger, less experienced director, a lot of times the actors can take over because the actors actually have a better sense of how sets are run than a lot of first-time directors do.
Well, it's funny when I was just working with Josh Hutcherson, he was exactly like this. Because he grew up on film sets and he's a really, really sweet kid, but his professionalism really astounded me. I was like, wow, this kid really knows what's up. I shouldn't talk about him like a stranger. I consider him a friend at this point. He was such a lovely guy. We just worked together. But I was very impressed by this. Just technically how for a 20-year-old guy, that if he wanted to, didn't have to give a fuck about anything.
Yeah.
And he really, there was an awareness that was pretty.
And you're
pretty
looking at the lights. I mean, you're also know where those lights are going and where they are around you and. There isn't if you're a sensitive, aware human being, you can take in so much of that. So that said, I think that there is a certain if you like filmmaking from my perspective, you kind of have to like everything about it, which means you have to like the sort of more logistical problem solving aspect of it, because it is problem solving, and and if you don't take into consideration the fact that you have all these people that are there who have a specific role and job and are expecting some sort of direction of what they're supposed to do, and also have an expectation that they're going to leave at some point, that then you're really not being respectful to filmmaking, and that you have to kind of embrace every part of this thing, which is not only the creativity, the sort of experimentation, the having fun, but it's also something where you have to respect human beings, and you have to respect that someone put money into this thing, and that there are these other things that are a thought or concern. So I mean, as a director, I do take it very seriously that I like to make my days if I can. Like I like for people to go home when they're supposed to go home, and for people to be in a good mood and come back the next day.
Well, also naturally the way that Antonio shoots lends itself to that, though, because I mean the thing is about doing long sequence shots is that as difficult as they are to set up and organize, once you're done, you're done. That you don't have it's strange for me going, like, having recently stepped back into a more traditional, more slightly more like big budget universe, and just seeing like the immense amount of coverage is crazy. I haven't worked like that in years, where it's just like, okay, let's get that on a 50, a 75, and it's just and on 150. Yeah, you're like 150. In my mouth.
I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome to have that kind of freedom. I also think it's a thing that we have been so. The reality of our lives as filmmakers has always been very trying to make as many decisions as possible.
Yes.
Not to make decisions later on. It's more make decisions now, which is why I like filmmaking on set as opposed to the writing and editing as much, because it's so much of make a decision now, and then that's the decision you're sort of married to sometimes until you get to the edit, and then you have to be very creative if you made the wrong choice. But that kind of in the moment immediacy is what's exciting about filmmaking. The options is kind of it's like I could sit here and I could go, all right, that was good. Why don't we go on a 50 in case you want to get closer? And then then they shoot if the actor is good, they'll just redo what they did in the previous take, which is and they'll just redo it. So there's no real heart to it, but you get it on camera. And they go, oh, it's good, it's probably got another one. And hey, Jane, why don't you go step in there?
For sure. Yeah, but the problem is, too, on a film that's of a bigger budget, is that just financially and producerially, it's there's a lot of pressure to have a lot of options. So it's like, even if a director might have something incredibly specific in mind, that like there's an obligation to serve up all these options.
Yeah, but there's also the school of thought, which is that old Hollywood school of thought, when those guys weren't in charge of the edit, because they would go from one studio picture to another, so they just shoot to edit. Do you know what I mean? They shoot with as few options as possible. So they stepped off stage. And they knew the film was going to be gone to some editor who was going to be, overlooked by some big producer, but they'd shoot to give the editor what it is to cut. You know what I mean? So there's two ways to look at it. So you can give options, and you can also sort of just shoot what you need, if they let you do it. But
that's what I'm referring to. I don't know.
How much are you shooting here? Because, like you just said, you like to send people home on time, and the large majority of this film is covered in a single shot per scene. But I also heard or read somewhere that you shot for 25 days and a 6-day shooting schedule, which seems like an enormous amount of time, especially for a small-scale shoot.
24 days. No, because, we were trying to... There were some days that were, like, the brothel days we had to shoot overnight, so those were difficult.
We had reverse split days from 2 a.m. to noon.
Yeah, for about 3 days.
That was rough.
But, that's still like a day.
Yeah.
It's just a weird day. But, no, because we were, because the fact that we were shooting very you're trying to be very decisive about what scenes you're going to do, and so we do those scenes and we try and dedicate as much time to those scenes as we could, which meant that we could do 2 scenes in a day, but that's 2 scenes, and so we'd spend all that time getting that scene perfect and then go home. 24 days is a lot of time. 24 days is a lot of time, and if you're, the other thing that we're always doing is you're always reviewing your outline and you're reviewing your shot list, and if you have to, you can always be decisive about what you don't need. You're like, oh, we covered that moment with this shot, or we did this with this scene. We don't need to rehash it. So it's always a matter, because it's a matter of. And again, it's one of those things that you have the luxury of doing it. You can do it later on when you get to the edit and just shoot as much options as possible. But if you're if you have a limited amount of time and money, you should always be thinking ahead and thinking of what you need versus what you already have.
Can you tell me about that shooting style from your perspective? Are you having to hit marks? Does that take you out of your performance at all, like knowing where you need to be?
Not if you have a good first AC. And Joe Anderson, our cinematographer on this film, is a brilliant first AC and worked very, very closely with his French AC. And no, we didn't stop for tons and tons of focus marks. It's usually this, even if someone is quite a good focus puller, it's something that it's a real sign of their youth or how green they are if after every take we have to stop and take marks. So no, I don't have a lot of memories of that, or didn't affect me too much. And the other thing is that Joe Anderson was respectful enough that, especially in sex scenes and stuff like this, that they were trying to do their job as invisibly and quietly as possible. I like work. The thing is that when you pull something off, like the scene in the brothel, the first time that I walk in there, it's a long fucking shot, and so it's 7 minutes or something like that, 8 minutes, and it's when you pull it off, and you have a sense that you have a real sense that you captured sunlight in a box. It's like, okay, it's done. Like we did it, and everyone has that sense of accomplishment. The cinematographer, the director, and it's a weird. It drives me crazy that I work on some movies and I have no idea what they're gonna feel like based on the edit. Now you can turn a comedy into a drama. I've seen it. I mean, it's a crazy thing. So it's like it's much nicer to know, okay, this movie can only exist in one way.
And to wrap up, a character question. One of my favorite parts about this movie is that Simon starts as one guy, and you need to go through the end to kind of like build the layers and end up with this complete person. How is it for you occupying all those headspaces without foreshadowing one or reverting back to another that you've kind of already disproved?
That's a smart question. It's almost too smart for me to answer. I don't know. I mean, I have a really I'm sorry. Don't worry. I have a really practical approach to performing, and every day a scene is just the task at hand. I don't have a philosophy about it. I wouldn't even know where to begin ever teaching somebody an acting class or anything like this. I think that at this point I've been doing it for so long that it's an instinct that you read a script and you try and make the words fit in your mouth. And you try and find the rhythm in which a character speaks, and you try and find the melody, if you will. It's more musical than it is anything. That you try and write the song, and then you try and remember the song, and then you just try to perform it the same way every day, in a different pitch and in various pitches. That's the only way that I know how to talk about it.